The text message came through at 0347 hours, while I was running night patrol outside Mosul, Iraq. Second tour. Phone buzzed against my vest, and I checked it during a water break. Grandpa Sam's gone, missing 3 days. Dad's handling everything. Now, don't worry about coming home. Mom, I read it twice, then tucked the phone away. My squad leader was signaling to move out. I shouldered my rifle and followed, but my mind was 8,000 miles away. Samuel Mitchell didn't just disappear. He was 78, sharp as a tack, ran his construction company like a military operation. He'd built Mitchell & Sons from nothing after Vietnam, turned it into the biggest contracting firm in 3 counties. He didn't abandon responsibilities or leave things unfinished. And my dad, Richard, had been waiting 40 years for his chance to run that company. I finished. The patrol filed my report and tried to call home. No answer? I sent a text to my mother, asking for details. Her response came 6 hours later. Police are investigating. Dad's taking care of business. Everything's under control. Under control. That phrase stuck with me through the rest of my deployment. My father had never controlled anything in his life. Now suddenly, he was in charge of a $15 million company. The letters from home stopped after that. My mother sent care packages and birthday cards, but no real news. When I asked about my grandfather, she'd write back with updates that said nothing. Still no word from Grandpa. Dad's working hard to keep the company running. He's hired new people, expanded operations. The business is good. I called when I could get satellite time, but the conversations were brief and careful. My father answered once, sounded different. Confident in a way I'd never heard. The company's doing better than ever, he said. Your grandfather would be proud. We've got contracts lined up for the next 2 years. Any leads on where he went? Nothing concrete, but you know how he was stubborn, independent. Maybe he just wanted a fresh start somewhere. It didn't sound like my grandfather at all. Samuel Mitchell had fought in Vietnam, built a business from scratch, raised 4 kids. He didn't run away from anything. I hung up and sat in my bunk, staring at the concrete walls. My bunkmate was reading a letter from his wife, smiling at whatever she'd written. I lay back and closed my eyes, trying to push away the questions. That kept circling. My father had spent his entire adult life working for a company he'd never truly control. My grandfather had made that clear. Richard was an employee, not a partner. Now the old man was gone, and suddenly my father was running everything. I served out my deployment without talking about it. What was there to say? My grandfather had vanished. My father was in charge, and I was halfway around the world, unable to do anything about it. Samuel Mitchell came home from Vietnam in 1970 with a Purple Heart and a plan. He'd saved his combat pay, borrowed money against his father's farm, and bought a truck, some tools, and a dream. Started with small jobs, roofing, siding, foundation work around Jefferson County. By the time I was born in 1991, he had 40 employees and a reputation for quality work that stretched across 3 states. He'd pick me up at dawn every summer morning, starting when I was 12, and we'd drive to whatever job site needed his attention. Construction is about trust, he'd tell me over coffee and donuts. You do good work, you charge fair prices, you keep your word. Everything else is just details. My father worked for the company too, but he was different. He'd gone to business school, had ideas about efficiency and profit margins. He wanted to expand faster, take bigger risks, cut costs wherever possible. You're thinking too small. He'd tell my grandfather we could double our revenue with the right investments. Modern equipment, aggressive bidding, volume discounts from suppliers. My grandfather would listen patiently, then shake his head. 40 years I've been building this reputation. I'm not going to risk it chasing quick profits. This frustrated my father endlessly. He'd complain to anyone who'd listen about working for a man who didn't understand modern business. He had an MBA, but he was taking orders from someone who'd learned construction in the Army. He's holding the company back, my father would say. It could be 10 times bigger if he'd just take some risks. But my grandfather wasn't interested in getting bigger. He was interested in staying honest. Tension came to a head during Christmas dinner 2017, my last holiday before deployment. My father had been drinking, and he started talking about succession planning. I've been with this company for 25 years, he said. I think it's time we talked about the future. My grandfather set down his fork. What kind of future? 76 years old, should be enjoying retirement, not working 12-hour days. Let me take over operations. You can stay on as chairman, but let me run the day-to-day business. And what would you do differently? Everything. New equipment, new processes, new markets. I could triple our revenue in 2 years. My grandfather looked at him for a long moment. Revenue isn't everything, Richard. This company has a reputation to maintain. Reputation doesn't pay the bills. It's paid our bills for 40 years. The argument escalated from there. My father stormed out, and I found my grandfather sitting alone in his study afterward, staring at old photographs of job sites. He doesn't understand, my grandfather said quietly. He thinks success is measured in dollars, but success is measured in trust. In the quality of work you leave behind, in the way people remember you. He looked at me seriously. When I'm gone, this company goes to you, not him. You understand what it means to serve something bigger than yourself? I thought he was being dramatic. Family businesses passed from father to son. That's how it worked. But now, sitting in my bunk in Iraq, I wondered if my grandfather had seen something I'd missed. I came. It's home in March 2018 to find everything changed. My grandfather's house was empty, my father said. He was maintaining the property. Mitchell and Sons had moved to a new office complex with modern equipment, expanded staff, and contracts I'd never heard of. Oh, business is incredible, my father told me during our first dinner. We're booked solid for the next 18 months. Your grandfather would be amazed. I drove around to familiar job sites, talked to subcontractors who'd worked with my grandfather for decades. The stories were troubling. Quality had slipped. Corners were being cut. Several clients had filed complaints. Your grandfather never would have let work like this leave the site, one foreman told me. He'd have torn it down and started over, rather than let his name be associated with substandard work. I called my grandfather's lawyer, James Kellerman. He'd handled the company's legal affairs for 30 years, knew every detail of the business. I've been hoping you'd contact me, he said when I reached him. We need to talk. Not over the phone, and not at my office. We met at a diner in Bardstown, 40 miles from Louisville. Kellerman was in his 60s, careful and methodical. He ordered coffee and studied me across the table. Your grandfather came to see me 8 weeks before he disappeared, he said. He was concerned about financial irregularities, asked me to conduct a private audit. What kind of irregularities? Missing invoices? Payments to shell companies? Equipment purchases that couldn't be accounted for? He suspected someone was embezzling from the company. My stomach dropped. Did he say who? He didn't have to. There were only 3 people with access to the accounts: himself, your father, and the office manager. The office manager had been with him for 15 years and was beyond suspicion, so he suspected my father. He was gathering evidence. Your grandfather was methodical about everything. He wanted proof before making accusations. Did he confront him? He was planning to. But first, he made some changes. He updated his will, revised the company's succession plan, and gave me sealed instructions to be opened only in the event of his death or disappearance. What did the will say? He left everything to you. The company, his personal assets, everything. Your father was specifically excluded. I felt the world tilt. My father doesn't know? Not unless your grandfather told him. Given the circumstances, I doubt he did. What circumstances? Kellerman reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. Your grandfather left this for you. He said if anything happened to him, you were the only person he trusted to handle it properly. Inside the envelope were bank records, financial statements, and a letter in my grandfather's handwriting. Michael, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me. I've discovered that Richard has been stealing from the company for at least 18 months. The attached documents show systematic embezzlement totaling over $400,000. I planned to confront him and involve the police, but I wanted you to have this information first. The company is yours now. Do what you think is right, your grandfather. I sat in that diner for 2 hours reviewing the evidence. The pattern was clear forged checks, inflated invoices, payments to companies that didn't exist. My father had been systematically looting the business while my grandfather built it. I spent the next week conducting my own investigation. I had access to some of the company's older accounts because my grandfather had added me as a signatory when I turned 18. My father had closed those accounts and opened new ones, but the transaction histories were still available. The theft was worse than my grandfather had realized. For $700,000 had been diverted over 2 years, equipment sales that never happened, inflated payroll records, kickbacks from suppliers. I also found something else: insurance policies. My father had taken out substantial life insurance policies on my grandfather 6 months before his disappearance. Policies that would pay out double in the event of accidental death. I called Detective Martinez, who'd been assigned to my grandfather's case. He was a former Marine, about my age, direct and professional. "I have information about my grandfather's disappearance," I told him. We met at the police station, and I spread out copies of everything I'd found. Financial records, insurance policies, the letter from my grandfather. "This is embezzlement," Martinez said after reviewing the documents. "But it doesn't prove your father killed your grandfather. Look at the timeline. The theft accelerated in the months before Grandpa disappeared. He was gathering evidence, planning to go to the police, and suddenly he vanishes, and my father takes over everything. Suspicious timing, but not conclusive evidence." "What about the insurance policies?" "My father took out substantial coverage on my grandfather right before he disappeared. Also suspicious, but not illegal. People take out insurance on family members all the time. What would you need to build a case?" Martinez considered this. "Ideally a body. But short of that, we'd need proof that your father knew about the investigation or evidence that he was involved in your grandfather's disappearance." I thought about this. "What if I could get him to admit something on recording? That would be helpful. But you'd need to be careful. If he's guilty of murder, he might be dangerous." I spent the next few days thinking about approach. My father trusted me, saw me as an ally. He'd been trying to bring me into the business, talking about expanding operations, taking on bigger projects. Finally, I called him and asked if we could meet at my grandfather's house. I said I wanted to understand the business better, maybe get involved in operations. He sounded pleased. "It's about time. I've been waiting for you to show interest in the family business." Family business. That phrase bothered me more than I expected. I contacted Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's white-collar crime unit. Martinez had recommended her, said she specialized in cases involving financial fraud and suspicious disappearances. "This is more than local embezzlement," I told her. "My grandfather is dead. My father has been operating under false pretenses for months. He's signing contracts, taking out loans, making business decisions, using a dead man's authority." We met at the FBI field office in Louisville. Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, but she understood the implications immediately. "How long has your father been operating as if he owns the company?" "Almost a year. He's expanded operations, hired new employees, signed long-term contracts, all based on the assumption that he's the legitimate owner. But according to the will, you're the actual owner." "According to the will, yes. But the will can't be probated until my grandfather is declared dead, which takes 7 years. In Kentucky. So your father has 7 years to operate the company and potentially drain its assets." "Exactly. Unless we can prove he's responsible for my grandfather's disappearance." Chen reviewed the financial records I'd brought. "This is definitely federal. Fraud, wire transfers, forged documents, interstate commerce violations. We have enough to arrest him on financial crimes." "But what about my grandfather? What about the murder?" "That's harder to prove without a body or direct evidence. But if we can get him talking, maybe he'll reveal something." "You want me to wear a wire? Would you be willing to do that?" I thought about my grandfather, about the business he'd built, about the trust my father had violated. "Yes, I'll do whatever it takes." We spent 2 hours going over the plan. The wire was smaller than I'd expected, just a tiny transmitter that would be taped to my chest. Chen and her team would monitor from a van parked down the street. "Don't push too hard," she warned. "Let him talk. If he's guilty, he'll want to justify his actions, especially to you." "What should I focus on?" "The financial irregularities, the missing money, his plans for the company. And try to get him talking about your grandfather's disappearance. When did he last see him? What was his state of mind?" Were they having any conflicts? I called my father that evening and asked if I could come over for dinner. He sounded enthusiastic. Perfect timing, he said. I've been wanting to talk to you about the future of the company. The future of the company. My grandfather's company. The company that was legally mine. I arrived at my grandfather's house at 1800 hours. Wearing the wire and trying to appear normal, my father greeted me at the door, more animated than I'd seen him in years. Come in, he said. Steaks on the grill and some excellent bourbon. We have a lot to discuss. The house felt different. My grandfather's furniture was gone, replaced with modern pieces that looked expensive. The walls had been repainted, and the photographs of job sites in military service had been replaced with abstract art. You've redecorated, I said. Your grandfather's taste was a bit dated. I'm modernizing everything: the house, the business, our whole approach to success. We sat on the new leather sofa, and he poured bourbon into crystal glasses I didn't recognize. Glad you're finally ready to get involved, he said. I've been waiting for this conversation for months. Tell me about the business. How are things really going? His face lit up. Better than ever. We've expanded into commercial construction, landed several major contracts, increased our workforce by 60%. Revenue is up 300% from where your grandfather left it. That's impressive. How did you manage such rapid growth? Modern business practices, competitive bidding, efficient operations, strategic partnerships. Your grandfather was too conservative, too focused on maintaining the status quo. What about the missing money? I've been looking at some of the financial records. The mood shifted slightly. What missing money? The bank records show some irregularities. Payments to companies I can't identify, equipment purchases that don't match our inventory. That's just modern accounting. We use multiple vendors, lease equipment instead of buying, work with contractors who specialize in different areas. Some of these vendors don't seem to exist. What are you getting at, Michael? I'm trying to understand what happened to over $700,000 that seems to have disappeared from the company accounts. The color drained from his face. Where did you get that number? From the financial records? The same records that show forged signatures, inflated invoices, and payments to shell companies. He set down his glass and stood up. You've been investigating me. I've been investigating the company. My grandfather's company. The company he left to me. Left to you. What are you talking about? His will? He changed it before he disappeared. Everything goes to me, not you. My father stared at me for a long moment. You're lying. I have a copy of the will, signed, notarized, and filed with his lawyer. You killed him for a company you were never going to inherit. I didn't kill anyone. Then where is he? Where's my grandfather? I don't know. You stole from him for 2 years. Found out. Confronted you, and you killed him to cover it up. That's not what happened? Then tell me what did happen. My father walked to the window and looked out at the yard where my grandfather used to work on equipment. When he turned back, his face was different, older, defeated. He was going to destroy everything, he said quietly. 40 years I worked for him. 40 years of being treated like an employee instead of a son. I had ideas, plans, ways to make the company truly successful, but he wouldn't listen. So you started stealing from him? Started taking what should have been mine anyway? The company, the profits, the respect? I was going to pay it back once I took over, but he was too stubborn. To retire? What happened the night he disappeared? We had a fight. He'd discovered some of the financial irregularities, accused me of embezzling. I tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. Said he was going to the police, that he'd already changed his will, and then I got angry. Told him he was a stubborn old man who didn't understand modern business. Said I was a thief and a disappointment. We were in his garage and He fell backward, hit his head on the concrete floor. Is he dead? I checked for a pulse. Nothing. I panicked. I couldn't call 911. They'd investigate, discover the missing money, figure out what I'd been doing, so you disposed of his body. I wrapped him in a tarp and put him in the back of my truck. Drove to the construction site where we were pouring foundations the next morning. I put him in the concrete forms. The room was silent, except for the sound of my father's breathing. Buried him in concrete, I said. I buried him in the foundation of the office building on Bardstown Road. He's still there. 30 feet underground, sealed in concrete. And then you took over his company. I took over what should have been mine from the beginning. I built that business as much as he did. You stole from him, murdered him, and buried him in concrete for a company you were never going to inherit. Didn't know about the will. You killed him for nothing. My father looked at me with eyes that seemed suddenly very old. Yes, I killed my father for nothing. The FBI burst through the door 30 seconds later. The trial lasted 3 months. My father pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, embezzlement, and federal fraud charges. He received life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. They recovered my grandfather's body from the foundation of the office building exactly where he said it would be. The company was destroyed. My father had leveraged everything, borrowed against equipment, taken out loans using forged documents. The debts exceeded the assets by almost $3 million. I inherited nothing but legal bills and the knowledge that my father had murdered my grandfather for a business that was already worthless. I used my military savings to pay the lawyers and kept enough to buy a small cabin in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. I'm medically retired now, discharged after an IED destroyed my left knee during my final deployment. The knee works well enough for hiking and fishing, but not for military service. I spend my days reading, writing, and trying to understand how a son could murder his father for money. My mother visits occasionally. She's forgiven me for exposing the truth, but she still doesn't talk about my father. Some betrayals cut too deep for conversation. 5 years after the trial, I attended a reunion of my grandfather's former employees. 23 people showed up: workers, subcontractors, office staff. They shared stories about my grandfather that I'd never heard, talked about lessons he'd taught them, projects they'd worked on together. "Your grandfather was the most honest man I'd ever met," said Joe Martinez, who'd worked as a foreman for 15 years. "He taught me that your reputation is the only thing that really belongs to you. Everything else can be taken away, but your reputation is yours forever." He paid us fair wages when other companies were cutting corners, added Sarah Chen. Hood managed the office. During the recession, when other contractors were laying people off, he kept everyone employed. Said we were family, and family doesn't abandon each other. An older man named Robert Wilson approached me as the reunion was ending. He'd been one of my grandfather's first employees. Hired in 1975. "Your grandfather talked about you all the time," he said. "He was proud of your military service, but he was prouder of the man you'd become. He used to say you understood what it meant to serve something bigger than yourself." "I failed him," I said. "I couldn't protect him. You honored him. You chose truth over family loyalty, justice over comfort. That took courage." He handed me a small wooden box. "Your grandfather gave this to me before he died. Asked me to give it to you if anything happened to him." Inside the box were my grandfather's Purple Heart, photograph of him in Vietnam, and a letter. "Michael, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and Robert has done what I asked. I want you to know that I'm proud of the man. You've become, you understand, honor, duty, and sacrifice in ways that come only from serving others. The company is gonna, I suspect Richard has destroyed it, but the values remain. Build something new. Build something honest. Build something worthy of the sacrifices others have made. Your grandfather." I keep that letter on my kitchen table now, next to a photograph of my grandfather in his army uniform. Some mornings I read it with my coffee, and I can hear his voice. "Your reputation is the only thing that really belongs to you." My father forgot that lesson. Chose money over honor, theft over honesty, murder over integrity. He destroyed everything my grandfather had built, including his own soul. I chose differently. I chose truth over family loyalty, justice over comfort, principle over profit. Cost me a father and a family business, but it preserved something. More important, my grandfather's reputation, his legacy, the values he tried to pass down. Some choices are easy. Others require everything you have. My grandfather taught me that. He taught me well. The sun is setting over the Kentucky mountains as I write this. Tomorrow I'll get up early, make coffee, and start building something new, something honest, something worthy of the sacrifices others have made. because that's what honor means. Continuing the mission even when the original objective is lost. My grandfather taught me that too. He taught me everything I needed to know about being a man.